ahead and open up your Bibles to Esther chapter 4. Esther chapter 4. So obviously with the last holiday we celebrated July 4th, Independence Day. And I preached last Independence Day on, is there really something to celebrate? When we look at our country and the state that we're in, it feels kind of a dangerous place to be. And so I was going through all my messages, and 3 years ago I preached the message, America is their hope. And if you were there on that Wednesday night, I had a bunch of pictures on the screen, and I had things going on behind me that kind of illustrated the points that I was making. And I got under a burden, because that message was difficult. I was under a great burden for our country because it was July 2016, and if you guys remember, June 2016 was the month when Obama came out and said it's Pride Month. That was the first time. And so our country was doing some things that were just, I don't know, I had a picture in my mind of the White House draped in rainbow colors, and there was just this burden I had. And so I titled that message, America is their hope. And so today's message is America, there is hope. I'm so excited we serve a loving God that does care about his people. And as I've watched the last couple of years, especially with the election in 2016 that has continued to irate people that they want to get out and scream left and right about how their entitlements are waning, and they're bitter at the world because Donald Trump has destroyed everything. He apparently started it when he was an infant, and it's just continued throughout the rest of his life. But you see, July 4th is a day that means a lot more to us than we realize. It's a special day in our country. You see, sadly, people don't understand the importance of that day. They don't realize what it was like to live under tyrannical rule. They think Donald Trump's a tyrant. And some on the right probably thought Obama was a tyrant. But they don't understand. Those men and women were willing to give everything for a little something called freedom and liberty. And yet in our country today, we have forgotten what that is and how blessed we are to have it. And so as we look at Esther, Esther was my key text of the entire message, that first one, America is their hope. So we're in Esther chapter 4. I want to look at verse 13. And to set the stage here, Mordecai has upset Haman. Haman's all upset because Mordecai wouldn't bow to him. And Haman says, well, we're going to kill you. So Mordecai, he goes to Esther and he says through mediators, hey, look, your people, they're about to be destroyed. And Esther says, well, listen, I can't go to the king. It's a policy. If I go to the king and I'm not welcomed in, I will die. And here's where we welcome into this story. It says this, verse 13. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther bade them return. Mordecai had this answer, go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise. And so will I go unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Let's pray. Our Father, Lord, I ask that you please bless this message. We are all in this room burdened for our country. We know that without you, there is no hope for this land. Lord, the people, the angry, the liberal, the God-hater, they don't frighten me. Lord, it's your judgment. Please don't turn your back on this country. Please show us that there is a path. Help us, Lord, to take a stand. We thank you, Lord, for all that you've done and provided. Please guide this message. Bless the hearts of the hearers. And Lord, if there's anything to it, Lord, let it be your will. In your Son's holy name we ask and we pray. Amen. So in that event that we see here, let's ponder the consequences of the actions. You see, because Mordecai would not bow to a man, A man that was filled with pride, a man that thought himself something special. He said, no, I'm not going to bow to you. I'm just not going to do it. He was willing to risk his life. But see, the consequence didn't just come to him. Haman in his pride went to go take care of all of the Jews, everywhere, sending out letters to all the provinces. And when he goes to Esther, she first says, wait a minute, I can't do this. And he says, basically, listen, somebody else will come up. God will bring somebody up. But you and your house, you'll be destroyed because of your lack of faith. You see, if you won't take a stand, who will? Now, did you come for such a time as this? And in our country, there were men that came for such a time as this. Now, in the previous message, I looked at where we were. I described in that first message family units, that dads taught their sons how to be sons, and moms taught their daughters how to be daughters, how to cook, how to clean, boys how to deal with scrapes and cuts without whimpering like a baby and needing a Band-Aid, Neosporin, and everything else in the world. I mean, I remember my dad, I got cut one night, we were out riding my dirt bike, I got cut on my knee, and he took spit and wiped it off. Now, granted, that probably wasn't the safest thing to do, but he was teaching me, it's okay. A little blood, a little sweat, a little tears, didn't do anybody any harm. But you see, back in the old days, if you want to call them that, the good old days, there were godly attitudes everywhere. Businesses, some of you can remember, you've told me that businesses were closed on Sundays because there was a conviction about being in church. And yet today, what do we see? The business owner, the first thing he wants to do on Sunday morning is open his doors. I stopped by the UDF store with my son to get him a drink before we came in here, and I noticed a little placard on the sign, no wine sales on Sunday. Why are you even open? Now granted, I stopped and I got him a drink, I understand that. But the convictions were lost. We can say no wine sales on Sunday. What about all the people that need to be in church on Sunday? Where's your conviction there? And then I talked about churches and the stands that they took and the convictions they had. And then I spoke specifically on where we are. And that was 3 years ago. Look at how the world has changed in just 3 years. Think back to what you thought and what you felt on Independence Day 3 years ago. Do you think we'd be having the strife and the Antifa and all these groups running around and burning people down and pigs or cops are pigs and frying like bacon and cops being killed left and right? Did you think that was coming? It's only getting worse. But you see, as in the days of Noah, will the coming of the Son of Man be? God promised us it's going to get worse before He finally comes back. And it gets better. And what frightens me is how much worse will it get? How much worse can it get than what we see today? When our nation's capital was adorned in rainbow and now our downtown city, I said a couple of weeks ago that there's kids down there at that parade, and Brother Cody went out on, what was it, YouTube or somewhere. You went somewhere and found a picture of a bunch of children dressed up in their rainbow garb standing next to all the drag queens who were half nude. Downtown Cincinnati. It's only getting worse. And so where are we going? I wish I could answer that. That was my ending point last message. Where are we going? I thought I had an answer. I thought, well, if we take a hard stand and we preach hard and we have convictions that God's just going to turn this around. And He gave us somebody that's helped turn it around, but we've been able now to see just how evil the world really is. In Europe, and since there's no little ears in here, in Europe they've got a big advertisement about their new sex party. And they've taken over a campground. It's classified as the biggest sex party in Western Europe. Where are the churches that are speaking up against that nonsense? Where's the heart and the conviction? You see, I want to take us back for just a little bit. There is hope. There's hope for our country. There's hope for the world. 2 Chronicles 7:14. It's a very familiar verse to many of you. You've got it memorized, but I want to look at it a little bit deeper. 2 Chronicles 7:14. Which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways. Then will I hear from heaven and forgive their sin and heal their land. Now, I know many a preacher has dissected this verse up and down, left and right. But notice the first word in that verse, if. If denounces you have to do something. So what is it that we must do? If my people, so we can't expect the Hollywood and the politicians and all those people to submit to God. They don't want God. So if my people, which are called by name, shall humble themselves. There's a lot of big churches out there. I read of a church down in was Dallas. They run about 2,000, and they were telling everybody how great it was when they handed out bottles of water to the needy. Well, that's great. But then they went and had a gay marriage ceremony in a church. And then they had a bunch of their teachers at the pro-choice rally. Pro-choice. What about all those bottles of water you gave out? Doesn't mean anything. If my people will humble themselves. You see, churches can be filled with pride, and that's where we find ourselves struggling and falling away. And pray. We are a praying church. I know we are. I've talked to many of you about your prayer lives, but how many churches out there are really getting on their knees and searching for God? Sincerely, with an open heart and mind. I've sat in churches and I've visited non-denominational churches and different places where the pastor will get up there and pray, and the kids are doing this on their smart device, and the parents are going. I saw one guy, the deacon, looking at his watch to see when the service is going to be over. Are you really praying? Yeah, you want to complain about where the country is, but are you really praying? Then it says this, and seek my face. That's not hard. You start getting a prayer life, you're naturally going to start seeking his face. But here's the hard part, and turn from their wicked ways. Now, wait a minute. Pause for a second. Whose wicked ways? My people. You see, it reminds us that we're sinners just like the rest of the world. How dare we judge? And my son gave me a great illustration on this morning. And I don't know if it's because of lack of sleep and he's just that tired or what it was, but we were driving away from the house. And as I said to some of you guys, we decided to foster a dog. And last night, my neighbor, I love him to death, but he decided to let off fireworks for like 4 hours. And so the dog was all over the house and barking and yipping and hiding and doing this and that and the next thing. And then, when they say shaking like a dog, the thing was in the corner like this, hiding. And so then when we tried to put it to sleep, get it in straight, that was fun. And so needless to say, it was a very long night. And so then we wake up and there's fireworks all over the house. And so he was up with us most of the night because, of course, you can't sleep with the fireworks go off. And so he's very tired. And on our way here, he saw a guy walking towards the house. Granted, not the nicest looking guy. Hair's all messed, tattoos on the face. I still don't understand that fad. What is the point of tattooing your face? It makes no sense to me. But he got very worried. And he said, Mom, is she safe? I said, yeah, she's safe. He said, yeah, I'm scared. Why? And he started crying. I'm thinking, okay, this is like sleep. He said, is that man a little dangerous? I said, Aiden, you're judging him, man, because his hair's a mess. He's got face tattoos. What if that man doesn't have a car and he just went to go get baby food for he's got to walk home. So we don't know what's going on. But it reminded me, my son's professed faith in Christ, and he's still judged another man. Granted, he's not, he's learning. But you see, all Christians have broken ways, and we must turn from them. Now, the next point that he makes here, then will I hear from heaven. You see, my son and I even talked about prayer. Does God listen? Does he answer prayer? Because how many times have you prayed and think, well, God's not listening to me? Look at the situation I'm in. Look at what I'm going through. God's not listening to me. Yes, he is. You just have to answer for that. You see, God is waiting on us to humble ourselves, to pray, to seek his face and turn from our wicked ways. And then will he hear. And notice the next one. Forgive our sins and heal the land. Now, point number one, remembering our history. Ms. Matra here, being a teacher, she knows that the education system has done a great job at destroying our heritage. They have lied and deceived and twisted truths around as much as they possibly can. Much of our history has been dissolved away because if they don't teach it, then we don't know it. And so in order to really get ourselves right in this country, we need to remember who was behind the foundation of our country. Who was really involved? And so I've got book after book after book in my library of all the founding fathers, their quotes. And so I pulled a bunch out. But first I want to remind us, we cannot look back for the sake of good old days. Ecclesiastes 7:10 says this, "Say not thou, what is the cause that the former days were better than these? For thou dost not inquire wisely concerning this." We can't look backward, but we can look at the men that were there and try to emulate them a little bit. Try to bring ourselves back to them. And so we must remember that, not for nostalgia's sake, but for facts. Facts will always win the debate. Always. Now, you may feel like you lost, but whoever you're dealing with, if they're built on a house of cards, they will find your facts hard to deal with. And so, I pulled these out. From 1690 to 1900, all ABCs and Ten Commandments were taught in the schools. And so, the school district of Arlington Township, Pennsylvania, of course prior to 1963, endorsed this public policy. And here it is. Each school shall be opened by the reading without comment of a chapter of the Holy Bible. Participation in the opening exercises is voluntary. The student reading the verses from the Bible may select passages and read from any version he chooses. Now, I don't agree with that, but at least they were trying. There are no prefatory statements, no questions asked or solicited, no comments or explanations made, and no interpretations given at or during the exercises. The students and parents are advised that the student may absent himself from the classroom, or should he elect to remain, not participate in the exercises. So see, they at least took a stand and said, okay, we're going to open with the Bible. And the person that we choose that day, he can open with any version, and he can read whatever he wants, and you can voluntarily choose to be there or not. But they did not say, we will not do this because somebody somewhere else said we shouldn't. They had a conviction of opening their school with the Bible every day. Now, we all know our founding fathers, but our foundation, no matter what the liberals and the media, whatever they want to say, it was based solely on the back of God. Without this country, without God, you can't explain this country. In the time that we've been a country, Italy has gone through 48 different types of government. You guys know that? 48 types. We have one constitutional republic. But it was because of who was behind it. Patrick Henry said this, "It cannot be emphasized too strongly or too often that this great nation was founded not by religionists but by Christians, not on religion but the gospel of Jesus Christ. For this very reason, peoples of other faiths have been afforded asylum, prosperity, and freedom of worship here." That was Patrick Henry. Now, I said this day is very important. July 4th. I mean, I know it's July 7th, but we're going back a little bit, so bear with me. July 4th, 1774. You all know John Adams. He wrote to his wife Abigail. And so for a lot of these college professors who are religious bigots that say God can't possibly be a part of our founding, well, they've got to argue with John Adams. He said this, "We went to a meeting at Wells and had the pleasure of hearing a friend preach, 'Be not partakers in other men's sins, keep yourselves pure.'" He followed that statement up with this, "We took our horses to the meeting in the afternoon and heard the minister again upon, 'Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you.' There is great pleasure in hearing sermons so serious, so clear, so sensible, and instructive as these." He wrote that letter to his wife. 1774. Think about that date. He was already looking to God for the founding of this country. And he was excited for it. Noah Webster said, "Education is useless without the Bible." Now, we often hammer the Roosevelt family because obviously there's a lot of things that they did that were not great. When you study political history, and you've studied some history, I think, Tracy and I have talked about this a lot. But Theodore Roosevelt was he made some good choices and some not so good choices. But I love this quote that he made. "I believe that the next half century will determine if we will advance the cause of Christian civilization or revert to the horrors of brutal paganism." He knew there was only one hope. Now, we may not agree on doctrine. We may not agree on political schemes. But he knew without God there was no chance in this country. Harvard University, 1642, had this as their precept. Let every student be plainly instructed and earnestly pressed to consider well the main end of his life and studies is to know God and Jesus Christ, which is eternal life. That was their founder, Harvard University. I wonder now how many Harvard students, and the reason I pulled that one, there's lots. You can get them from Princeton, you can get them from Yale. But I pulled Harvard because Harvard was the law professor that told his students they could skip the exam because they were dealing with trauma, PTSD from Trump's election. They were allowed to, the law professor. I love the commentators saying, "Greg, we've got cupcakes for lawyers now. How are we ever going to get anything done?" Now, it didn't end there. John Quincy Adams said this: "The highest glory of the American Revolution was this. It connected one dissoluble bond between the principles of civil government and the principles of Christianity." He followed that up. From the day of the Declaration, they, the American people, were bound by the laws of God, which they all, and by the laws of the gospel, which they nearly all acknowledge as the rules of conduct. That was stated July 4th, 1821. John Jay, the first Chief Justice, has chosen, said, "Providence has given us to our people the choice of their rulers, and it is the duty as well as the privilege and interest of a Christian nation to select and prefer Christians for their rulers." That was October 12th, 1816. I wonder why John Roberts doesn't read that book. A professing Christian conservative. Yet he keeps making decisions that don't follow what he says he believes as our current Chief Justice. You see, today our history is not being taught. And here's a good stat. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it before, but I found it in one of my history books. The University of Houston collected 15,000 writings from all of our founding fathers. 15,000. And they went through every single sample. They wanted to know which documents were the basis of our country, the foundation to our Constitution. And out of those 15,000, there were 3,154 that they selected that had a significant impact to the choices they made with the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. Now, out of those, the Bible is quoted 16 times more than any other source. 94% of the quotes were based strictly on the Bible. 34% came directly out of the Bible, King James Version, and 60% used the Bible to come to their conclusion of this government. So, again, they say there was no God in our founding. So let's take a look at some of the biblical principles that come straight from the Scripture. See, I'm on this because as much as I love her, there was a young lady, and I think I may have even mentioned this before, but it is stuck in my head. I asked her in my high school class for history, we were going through the basis of history. I said, "What was D-Day?" And as she looked at me, and she pondered that idea for a little while, I said, "What is D-Day? Can you tell me what D-Day is?" And you could tell that she was searching for the thought she was trying to get in. She goes, "I don't know, Destruction Day." I said, "What does destruction mean?" She said, "I don't know." Then I dated myself and I asked them, "What was September 11th?" And half of them did not know. That's not too long ago. So, what biblical principles brought forth out of the Bible were used to be our kind of directives for making our country? So you're in Exodus 18:21. It says this: "Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them, to be rulers of thousands, and rulers of hundreds, and rulers of 50, and rulers of tens." Out of that, we get separation of powers. No one single ruler. That was cited by several of the founding fathers. Jeremiah 17:9. The heart is deceitfully wicked. Now you see, a lot of people will say Jeremiah 17:9 couldn't possibly have been part of our founding because none of the guys specifically say that that is a deceitful lie. I found almost all of our founding fathers in some way mention Jeremiah 17:9 in one form or another. And here's what one of the men said. I believe it was John Quincy Adams. He said, "If to understand just how deceitful the human heart is, the only way to combat that is equal power." And and then he took to Exodus 8 and 20. He knew that with a central government having a kingship the way that England did, there was no chance for our country to survive. It would just degenerate into terrible, terrible, terrible places to live. And now you can kind of see what's happening. You see, we started getting away from the Bible, and now we just look at men's hearts and, oh, everybody's good and everybody's kind. No, not really. Sadly to say. But now, what's the next principle? Isaiah 33:22. Isaiah 33:22. When we look at this verse, I hope you see it right away. Isaiah 33:22. For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, and the Lord is our king. He will save us. What do you see there? The three branches of government. You see, they specifically cited this verse, but we have to have a branch that's a legislative branch, the law-giving side. But they cannot compete with the king side. Even though our God is a Trinity, they understood that the fact that there were three separate offices here to keep balance. And so then we have a king. Well, we don't want a king. We just left the kingship. And so they said, let's have a president. And so they cited the president, and they called him all kinds of different names before they finally settled on that. And so they said, well, he can't just have specific power. He's more of an executor, a leader. So then we also have to have what? The judge. The judicial. Because you see, if we have the lawgivers and the judges working together, we've got conflicts. And somewhere over our 245-year history, we've lost that separation. And now we have judges being legislators trying to be judges, and we have a whole mess of a dichotomy going on that I don't know that we can come back from. Now here's another one, and I love people that like to argue with me on this one. Ezra 7:24. Ezra 7:24, just a few books back. There's a bumper sticker, and I don't know if it's famous, but I've seen it several times. And it's always on a cynic or skeptic's car. It says, the church just wants your money. In some form or fashion it says that. Religion just wants your money. Religion wants your bank account number, you name it. And one of their big things is, the follow-up statement of that is, tax the churches. So Ezra chapter 7, verse 24, let's take a look at that. It says this, also we certify you that touching any of these priests and Levites, singers, porters, Nethians, or ministers of this house of God, it shall not be lawful to impose toll, tribute, or custom upon them. That verse was specifically cited by our founders to say we will not tax churches. Because remember, there were lots of churches that were trying to become state churches. Virginia and Rhode Island, they tried to give Rhode Island to the Baptists, and they said, no, we're not going to do that. Because you see what happens when a church has control, what do? They get all power. And that's why in Roman Catholic countries today, there's such a stranglehold on the people. You can't get in there and preach and teach. And if you're not part of the Roman Catholic Church, you don't get the government pay, and you don't get the welfare, and you don't get all the things that the Catholic priests do. Because they're working in unison. You see, the Danbury Baptists believed in separation of church and state, and they worked with Thomas Jefferson, and they are the church that was behind the founding of this country, the first 10 Bill of Rights. They said no. You see, the founders, they went to them and said, hey, look, we'll give Rhode Island to you guys. Rhode Island was a haven for Baptists, and of course it's the smallest state, because these Baptists are a little weird, and they're not going to do anything big in this country. So we'll keep them in the smallest area. And so Jefferson and all the others, Ben Franklin, they went to the Danbury Baptists and said, hey, let's give you Rhode Island. And they said, no, we want religious liberty for everyone. You see, even then they understood that a person that wants to be a Catholic has the right to worship as a Catholic. A person that wants to be a Satanist, even though they disagreed, they believed that person had that right. And so Thomas Jefferson later wrote a letter, and he said the separation of church and state, what he meant by that was not that the state and the church had to be separate, but that the state would not get involved in the church's affairs. That did not mean that the church go behind its four walls, stay hidden, and don't have any kind of sway in the political arena. It didn't mean that we should just shut up and be quiet and hide in the corner. And unfortunately, a Supreme Court ruling, I believe it was 1948-ish, if my dates are right in my memory, they said, no, that was a separation of church and state. The problem is out of that whole letter, that Supreme Court took 14 words and used 14 words out of context to justify the state and the church cannot be co-intermixed. You can't have it. And based on that, the Bible was removed from our schools. Prayer was removed. You see what happens when a little bit of leaven gets in? Just a little bit. Now, after I said all this, yet I have left thee 7,000 in Israel, all the knees which have not bowed unto Baal, and every mouth which is not against him. You see, Elijah was burdened. He thought he was alone, but he wasn't alone. There were 7,000 that God had kept back. You see, in our country, we've got a country of an estimated 330 million people. It's probably more than that. How many of that million has God kept back throughout their life? No matter what this country's politicians do, no matter what this country's leaders choose to do, you will not bow. You'll stand. I see a group of them right here. They're all over the place. You see the Trump 2020 stickers are coming out, and people are getting on their Facebook and doing videos with no fear of saying, hey, I'm a Republican, I'm a Christian, and I may be white, black, green, or orange. I don't really care anymore. Here's my stand. And it's happening more and more. And now even people that work at these liberal news medias, the NBCs and CBSs and all them, some of those reporters are coming out. This is wrong. I'm a conservative. I've been quiet all my life. I'm not being quiet anymore. And they're taking the stand. And it's been over the last 3 years because they now see through this experiment of Donald Trump that we've got a better view of who they really are. They've shown their true colors. They've taken the mask off and told us, yeah, we want to see this country destroyed. But you see, 1 Kings, how many millions are in this country that are ready to take a stand? And they won't bow when they're told, throw your Bible away. As Obama said, they hold to their guns, their Bible, their religion. That's right, they do. And I don't have any sorrow for that. Because I don't trust the government. I trust the government of the 1700s with our founders who said, without God, there was no chance of this. I don't trust you. And so you see, there is hope. Point number 2, holding the line. No matter where those soldiers in secret are, we must hold the line, and we must do this in several ways. First, individually, we must understand what the media, the politicians, and our government really are. They're looking to destroy our country, and they're doing it to the generations that follow us. Brother Norm used to say to me about the school, whether it's 40 or whether it's 10, we're training up the next generation, the next people. That's who we're worried about, because as you are getting to know, they're the ones that are running the government. They're the ones that deal with taxes, and they're the ones that watch over the laws. And if they can't handle an election and they've got to leave to go home because it's just too much, what are they going to do when the world really goes haywire? Now, I understand we're all reaching, and God is prepping this world for the second coming, and He's getting us ready for what's about to happen. I understand that. But my fear is how many kids will be sacrificed on the altar of education and the altar of the government because the government wants them. You see, yeah, we do deal with the spiritual battle, God and Satan. We deal with that, but we're also dealing with the battle between a government that wants to destroy. The communists used to go in during Russia when they were taking over the KGB, and also Mao Zedong. What they would do is they would go in, and if there was a missionary, they'd kill him. And then they would steal all the kids from the parents and take them to different education camps. And there was a report of one where they brought the kid back, and he said, this kid is useless. Well, he's a brilliant kid. They say he's useless. You've trained him too much about this God. They couldn't break him. He was 11. There's another man we know of that was about 12, and he was kidnapped. So you see, there's always somebody there. We need to fight for that next generation. We must hold the line. Now, in calling out the lies that we see everywhere, we must remember this. God has some promises, both good and bad. Isaiah 5:20. Isaiah 5:20 gives us this promise: woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. We have a world that says evil is good. It's okay. You be whatever you want to be. If you want to dress up like a chicken, it's fine. You're normal. I'm sorry, you're not normal. That's not a normal thing to do. And so here's the cool story I found yesterday. The transgender issue's been big last few years. But now we have doctors that are coming out, pediatric doctors, who say this is a mental disorder and our government is pushing it. Now they might lose their jobs over that, but they're not willing to bow. They're taking real science and saying, see, look, this kid's got something twisted in his brain. We need to help him, not prolong this insanity. We got people who are tattooing their whole bodies, looking like lizards. I mean, come on, really? Woe unto them. And when God says woe, it's a dangerous word. Woe unto them means something bad, really bad, is about to happen to you. Now, he also gives us a promise in Psalm 9:17. It said, the wicked shall be turned into hell, and all nations that forget God. Now, here's the problem with that verse. The liberal world says that we never were godly. Yes, we were. We were a nation that knew God, except now we're choosing to forget Him. We're choosing to forget Him because we've been silent. We won't speak up what we know. We won't identify the deceptions of those around us. Turned into hell, the nations that forget God. Now turn with me to 1 Peter 3:12. See, God does not forget. We see the wicked, deceitful things that our country does. God does not forget. 1 Peter 3:12 says this, for the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and His ears are upon their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. You see, Brother Carlson, you were a cop for years, and you saw probably the worst in humanity. God doesn't forget. And He doesn't look away. Remember what 2 Chronicles 7:14 told us to do. Humble ourselves. Just because we're saved and we're going to heaven doesn't make us any better, as I've heard you say many times. If we humble ourselves and get serious about our prayer life, there is hope for this country. And remember that God's face is facing those wicked people every single day. And all their wicked sins and evil doings are not forgotten. They're not ignored, and they're not thrown away. Remember Psalm's promise. Every nation that forgets God goes where? It's turned into hell. So in this hope, Psalm 33:12, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people He hath chosen for His own inheritance. So how do we get back there? I told you this would be a positive message, and you're still waiting for that positive part because I can feel it. It's pretty draining on my mind and my heart to look at our country and see what it is. I've told my wife 100,000 times, I am born in the wrong generation. I feel like I should be a greaser in the 50s where, things were simple. Men were men, women were women, men went to fight wars, we knew our roles, God was first in everybody's lives. That's my brain. So when I look at this psychotic world that we live in, I really struggle with it. Because I've got a son that's growing up in it. And I got to do everything in my power to protect him. I got a little sister and a new brother-in-law that's still growing up in it, whether you think you're old enough or not, you're still growing. And you can look at Brother Carlson, he'll tell you, you don't know nothing yet. But you see, we've got to take a stand somewhere. Ben Franklin said this. March 1778, he wrote to the French ministry, whoever shall introduce into public affairs the principles of primitive Christianity will change the face of the world. When we want to see our country change, we need to be that example, as I've preached many times recently. But we can't just rush into the world, so please look at Luke chapter 5. We can't just rush into the world and expect them to listen. Luke chapter 5, we'll start at verse 1. It says this, and it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret and saw two ships standing by the lake. But the fishermen were going out of them and were washing in their nets. And he entered into one of the ships, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. Hold that thought right there, a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. Now when he had left speaking, he said unto Simon, launch out into the deep, hold that thought, and let down your nets for a draught. And Simon answering unto him, Master, we have toiled all the night, and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word, I will let down the net. And when they had this done, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their net brake. Verse 7, and they beckoned unto their partners, which were in the other ship, that they should come and help them. And they came and filled both the ships, so that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. For he was astonished, and all that were with him at the draught of the fishes which they had taken. Verse 10. And so was also James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Jesus said unto Simon, Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men. And when they had brought their ships to land, they forsook all and followed him. Now I understand this is often used for missionary work, evangelism, but I want to take a moment and challenge you. In this room are very, very wise, educated people. The people we're going to deal with out there are not. When I asked that young girl what D-Day was, I did not expect to hear destruction. I love her to death. She's a sweetheart. But that has resonated with me for a long time. As much as I get frustrated with pastors and Christians that don't know their Bible, and they spend all their time condemning others, and we've got the right way and all that nonsense. What about just general knowledge? When I go to McDonald's and I hand somebody $5 and my bill's $4.25 and I hand them a quarter, they can't figure out just to hand me $1 back without the computer. The world has gone insane. So I want to look at this in the context of how should we teach those. Because you guys know American history. If you want information, I've got hundreds of pieces of information in my library. I'll give you quote after quote after quote. But you see, if we inundate these people with quotes, they're going to shove us off. The brain goes dead. You got Ben Franklin's quote, can't hear that. If it's not on social media or Instagram, I don't know what you're talking about. So here's how we need to approach it. Look back at verse 2. And they saw two ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen were gone out of them. Now remember, here's gone out of them. The knowledge is gone. The history that our parents and my grandparents, your parents took pride in, they don't even talk about it anymore. So we need to be happy about our heritage. I get you want to say slavery and all this nonsense, but there's evil everywhere. Common sense should tell you that. There's still slavery going on today all over the world. So don't condemn America based on that little point. But if you're going to do that, make sure you have your facts right. Now, to say that America is not a godly nation requires you to be deceitful and dishonest. To be a liar, point blank. So the knowledge was gone out of them. And they were washing the nets. Verse 3, he entered into one of the ships. So when we bring truth to them, we need to understand what we're doing. We're entering into their world. And he prayed that he would thrust out a little bit. We've got to inundate the world with a little bit of knowledge first. It's like an inoculation. They don't give you a big fire shot and expect you to live through it. They give you a little bit, and then a little bit more, and a little bit more, and you build up that immunity to it. You see, people today, they cannot handle Bible truth. But they can't even handle American history. They can't even handle how great this country was and is. So as we deal with them, we need to be selective and deal with the things that interest them and just give them a little bit of the knowledge. Now when he left speaking, verse 4, and said unto Simon, launch out into the deep. And then as we start to win them and start to get them to see the history of what this country really was and the Bible basis upon it, then we can take them deeper. It's like educating a kid. I can't go to a government high school and start talking about this, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. He'll be so confused because government high schools now don't teach history before 1900. At least in Oregon. I don't know about what they're doing here in Ohio anymore. But even if they are, is it skewed? Is it lies? Is it misinformation? We need to give it to them little by little. Point number 3, gaining ground. In order to gain back our ground, we must remember what we're dealing with. Again, as I said, uneducated, unconcerned people. Brother Ray, would you mind reading 1 Corinthians 1:27?
But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world, not found the wise. God hath chosen the weak things of the world, to confound the things which are mighty.
Think about that. God has chosen the foolish thing to confound the wise. Remember what I said, the nation that forgets God is turned into hell. Our nation has forgotten not only God, but our history. And God is allowing it. He's allowing the foolish things to confound the wise. We've got lawgivers that think it's okay for men to go into a girl's bathroom. Are you kidding me? They're nuts. You and I look at that and think, okay, that's pretty easy. No! It's 2 letters, no! But yet, well, if we make sure that we make everybody feel happy, because we're a welcoming city and store and you name it, okay. Now Target, I'll call them out, has a bad rash of abuses happening in the bathroom. Well, duh. It's not hard. Foolish things confound the wise. So now, we have an uneducated, unconcerned people. And yes, many may be a reprobate, as we know in Romans chapter 1, verse 27. If we look at the stats and the information, and I read a stat last night that broke my heart. It said, and this was 4 years ago, it said that the internet is almost 12% nothing but pornography. 12%. 25 million websites dedicated to it. Well, that was just a few years ago. What is it now? Yeah. And you know what the other stat was? The number 1 day of pornography searched online? Sunday.
What is it?
Sunday.
Oh, it says it's 7 out of the top 10 things searched daily. It breaks my heart, but again, it is hard. So I want to tell you a story. April 2015, Indiana was working on what was called the RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Mike Pence was behind it. Mike Pence saw what was happening in our country. Bakers were getting sued, and landowners were getting sued because they wouldn't have the gay wedding, they wouldn't bake the gay cake. And so he was under conviction. We need to protect our churches because they're coming after you guys. We don't just need to protect our churches, we need to protect the businesses that have a right to take a stand. And so in April 2015, there was a little pizza shop called Memories Pizza. Some of you guys remember this, but I'm going to give you the whole story. I don't know that y'all got the whole story. So Memories Pizza, there was a reporter named Alyssa Marino. She worked for ABC 57 News, and she was given this story. Now, if you were to look at her Twitter feed, whatever you want to call it, underneath her name, the title was storyteller, not reporter, not investigative journalism, storyteller. And so she drove to a little town called Wagerton, and in that little town, there was this little pizzeria. This pizzeria, it had on its front windows things about God, and it was pretty clear to see what that little pizza was. It was a Christian-based pizzeria. Now that town, this small town in America, 2,300 people live there. 2,300. Now that's pretty small. Now in that town, she went into this little pizzeria and she pondered some questions with the owner because obviously, so many people want to have their gay wedding catered by a pizza shop in the middle of nowhere. But she went there and she says this on her Twitter feed. I just went into their shop and asked how they feel about the Indy RFRA, and never asked them about catering. Isn't that interesting? That's her own testimony, the reporter. So when she went back to her editors, of course the editors know we need to make money, so let's make sure that we jazz this story up a little bit, because really there was no story to be had. she said, well, we don't mind, this is the testimony of the person that owns the store. If you're gay, we'll serve you, we got no problem with that, but we've never been asked to care our way. That was her answer. So here's the headline that paper ran with. RFRA, first Michigan business to publicly deny same-sex service. No, they didn't. They didn't go out publicly, you went to them. Then, of course, HuffPo grabbed onto it and said this: Indiana's Memories Pizza reportedly becomes first business to reject catering weddings. No, they didn't. They didn't say that at all. And then it was followed by BuzzFeed's headline, Indiana pizzeria owners say they deny LGBT people service. Now, we live in a nation where people don't actually read the story or do any research, they just look at the headline. So within hours, Memories Pizza's Yelp page went from just a few reviews of really good service to over 1,000. Terrible service, bad people. One high school coach was pulled off of her duties as a coach because she said, who's going to go with me to Wickerton, Indiana and burn down Memories Pizza? On her Twitter. Oh yeah, that's a great person we want as a coach. Then the owner started getting death threats. We're going to find you, we're going to kill you. All because of headlines. And then, of course, because the headlines got traction, here's the beginnings of the opening evening news. And we all love that guy that sits up there who's so real serious. We've got terrible news tonight. And this is what he said. Only on ABC 57 News tonight, we went to small towns looking for a reaction to the RFRA. We found one business just 20 miles from welcoming South Bend, a very different point of view. Wasn't that interesting? They didn't come to you. They didn't ask you to come to them. They were a little pizza shop hiding in the corner of this little town of 2,300 people, not trying to cause any trouble at all. As a matter of fact, I decided I wanted to get really specific for you today. So I looked up the address of ABC 57 News. And then I looked up the address of Memories Pizza. The shortest trip was 25.1 miles, 55 minutes. The longest was 31.2 miles, 55 minutes. You mean you drove an hour to find this little pizzeria? So it was welcoming South Bend. We're welcoming South Bend, we love you. Not this little podunk-cake pizzeria. Here's some information. Who's the mayor of South Bend? Anybody know in here? You should.
Yeah, it's that guy running for president.
Yeah, Pete Buttigieg. Pro-gay guy. He's a gay, he comes out as gay, he's got a husband, all that good stuff. Now, I'm not on a thing about gay, I'm just giving you a testimony. He was elected in 2011. Guess when his re-election was? 2015. This story came out April 2015. You know what's funny about Pete Buttigieg? He came out as gay just before the 2015 election for South Bend. Remember, South Bend's welcoming. Now, I'm not saying there's something there, but come on, people, we know the truth. Now, here's what's scary to me. Alyssa Moreno, who was the creative storyteller, you would think, man, after doing this to this little pizzeria, you'd probably lose your job. No, she got a promotion. She now works at USA Today. But here, out of that terrible story, is the hope that I tell you that our country still has. One source that I got all of this information from is from a website called Reason, a very pro-LGBT website, very pro-liberal, and they said this was wrong to do this to this place. That writer said what this was terrible journalism. What happened to them was wrong. Another liberal writer said we destroyed a pizzeria for no reason. Then Glenn Beck started a GoFundMe page. It created $800,000 in donations for this little pizzeria. The number one group donating were the LGBT. I said, well, this is not right what we're doing. It's not right. You see, even in sin, there was still hope. And that little pizzeria, sadly, they closed in 2018. Whether it be the damage done, whether the owners just had enough, I don't know. But we need to start gaining back ground. We gain back ground by honesty, remembering that structure and command and promise of God, He holds on to it. Now, I want to read you out of this little character, Beautiful. A beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. I believe very much, even though that iniquity abounds and the love of many is waxing cold, Matthew 24:12, there's still hope. The hope is that we get on fire for the Lord. The hope is that we take seriously the consequences of us not speaking up. Independence Day is great, and blowing fireworks off is great, and all these wonderful things that we can do, and the parades and flags, and all of these things, it's wonderful, and I love it, I do. But what do we celebrate? I read this to those same high schoolers. It's a little long, but I pray that the material will work in you. I pray it's the attitude that we have. My pages are still. This was given at St. John's Church in Richmond, Virginia. And I love this book. If you ever find it, get it. It's got a lot of the quotes. It was at Sam's Club. I picked it up. And it's got some writings that a lot of other authors won't even cite. But this was given by Patrick Henry at the church, St. John's Church in Richmond, Virginia. Take yourself back there for a little bit. And look at our future. And I pray we have the same attitude as this man. No man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism as well as the abilities of the very worthy gentlemen who have just addressed the House, but different men often see the same subject in different lights, and therefore I hope it will not be thought disrespectful to those gentlemen if entertaining as I do opinions of a character very opposite to theirs. I shall speak forth my sentiments freely, without reserve. There is no time for ceremony. This is pre-Revolutionary War. The question before the House is one of an awful moment to this country. For my own part, I consider it nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery, and in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be the freedom of the debate. It is only in this way that we can hope to arrive at truth and fulfill the great responsibility which we hold to God and our country. Should I keep back my opinions at such a time through fear of giving offense? I should consider myself as guilty of treason towards my country and of an act of disloyalty toward the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly kings. Mr. President, it is natural to man to indulge in the illusions of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth and listen to the song of that siren till she transforms us into beasts. Is this the part of wise men engaged in a great and arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to the number of those who, having eyes, see not, having ears, hear not, the things which so nearly concern their temporal salvation? For my part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cause, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst, and to provide for it. But I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging the future but the past. In judging by the past, I wish to know that where there has been the conduct of the British ministry for the last 10 years to justify those hopes which gentlemen have pleased to solace themselves in the House, is it that insidious smile with which our petition has been lately received? Trust it not, sir. I will prove a snare to your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. You see all the Bible verses and references he's given you? Ask yourselves how gracious reception of petition comports with these warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our land. Our fleets and armies are necessary to a work of love and reconciliation. Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that we must be called to win back our love? Let us not deceive ourselves, sir. There are implements of war and subjugation, the last
arguments to which kings resort. I ask, gentlemen, sir, what means this martial array if it purposes be not to force us to submission? Can gentlemen assign any other possible motive for it? Has Great Britain an enemy in this quarter of the world to call for an accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir, she has none. They are meant for us. They can be meant for no other. They are sent over to bind and rivet us upon those chains which the British ministry have been so long forging. And what have we to oppose them? Shall we try argument? Sir, we have been trying that for the last 10 years. Have we anything new to offer on the subject? Nothing. We have held the subject up in every light of which it is capable, but it has been all in vain. Shall we resort to entreaty and humble supplication? What terms shall we find which we have not already exhausted? Let us not, I beseech you, sir, deceive ourselves, sir. We have done nothing that could be done to avert the storm which is now coming on. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne. We have implored its interposition to arrest the tyrannical hands of the ministry and parliament. Our petitions have been slighted. Our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult. Our supplications have been discarded, and we have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne. In vain, after these things, may we indulge the fond hope of peace and reconciliation. There is no longer any room for hope. If we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve those inestimable privileges for which we have been so long contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have been so long engaged, and which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our contest shall be obtained, we must fight. I repeat, sir, we must fight. An appeal to arms to the God of hosts is all that is left to us. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be next week or next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed and when a British guard shall be stationed in every house? Shall we gather strength by irresolution and inaction? Shall we acquire the means of an effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs and hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemies shall have bound us hand and foot? Sir, we are not weak if we make proper use of those means which the God of nature hath placed in our power. 3 millions of people armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a country as that which we possess are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations and who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, the active, the brave. Besides, sir, we have no election. If we were base enough to desire it, it is now too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged, their clanking may be heard on the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come, sir. I repeat it, let it come. It is vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clashing of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is that gentleman wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty. Patrick Henry took a stand in a very tumultuous world, a world that wasn't ready for a fight. Cody, Kyle, we're in a fight. We're in a fight for our history. If we want to see better days in this country, we better teach what those better days were and hold to them. And remember that this land is a beautiful land. It's a God-given land. And God has his 7,000 still fighting a good fight. And we need to fight ours. This past July 3rd, I met a man, and I'll close with this story. I met a man, he's an officer of the law down in Cincinnati, been a cop for 48 years. He was
I got a chance to really talk to him. I got serious with him. I said, as a pastor, I see the evil, the spirituality in the world. I just see it. I see the evil looks and the bad hearts. And I said, but you see the human side. I said, how bad is it getting? Be honest with me. And he shook his head and he said, lock your doors. Watch your kids. It's only going to get worse. He said it's getting to the point now where you have heroin addicts going into a fast food restaurant, clogging the toilet and flushing it and ODing in the bathroom because they know Narcan's on its way. And they're doing it 3 and 4 and 5 times a day. He said then you got the drug dealers who are kidnapping people left and right. You can't find people. You don't hear about it in the news. You've probably got testimonies on that, the things that they don't tell you about. I said, is it really that bad? And he said, yeah. There's a hope in this country. There's a hope for this country I'm looking at. Godly Christians that are willing to take a stand for what they believe, what they know is right, and they're willing to sacrifice for it. We're going to shine brighter than anybody else. I pray also. I'm working with some pastors and trying to challenge them as well. I'm no authority on this, but I want to see some excitement. This country is still a good country. We still do a lot of good. For what little bad was going on, we do a lot of good. So let's pray that God blesses us. This Independence Day, we do have something to celebrate. Our nation knew God. Let's bring him back. Let's teach him again. To everyone we know, whether it's Hunter and his friends, whether it's Presley. Because just one Patrick Henry stirred up a whole group of men to pick up arms and take a stand for what was right. All we need is one.